All right, the meeting is called to order at 6:01 p.m. I'm going to go ahead and go into roll call. All right, Vice Speaker Debate.
Present.
Adegarla. Ulrich.
Here.
Becker. Brecht. Carter. Claiborne. DeVore. Philippi. Rinaldi. Garcia. Goff. Haas. Bueller. Larson. Lent. Mahoney. Mascar. Mays. McCready. Patel. Paulson. Ruley. Knapp. Seth. Dayway. Aggs. Stout. Strickland. Thornton. Wagmeister. All right, we have quorum. We'll go ahead and go into the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Acting Speaker Advait.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States, republic, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, and justice for all.
All right, wonderful, wonderful. We'll go into our program for this evening, the Finance Director's presentation with Finance Director Zastro. Please close your laptops for the duration of the presentation.
Howdy, y'all. How's it going, everyone? So throughout this whole thing, this is voting on a lot of money tonight. If there are any questions at all, I want to hear them. There are no bad questions. A lot of you are new to the finance process. A lot of you have been involved in Senate, but haven't really touched the finance process. That's totally okay. I just want to make sure that we're having a clear, informed debate on all the procedure, all the parliamentary procedure, and the general, what's going on with all this. So any questions, I want to hear them. Yeah, so we're voting on about $631,000 of money tonight. One of the most of that is coming from the $300,000 supplemental funding bill. Then we have $1,000 between the funding lectures, books, and the genre debt contracts, and another $330,000 with the contract with student engagement over the course of 3 years at $110,000 as the starting value. So that's a brief rundown. If you could pass it on, Jaden. Also disappointed Ludwig isn't here. He was supposed to bring me a laser pointer, but that's okay. So like I said, we're going to go through each of these in turn. There's going to be a section for questions at the end of each of them. If you want to write down your questions, that might be a good way to kind of approach this. Yeah, so we're just going to be going through kind of pros and cons, kind of history on a lot of these different things, because Senate has not yet seen a debt contract or a regular contract this year, and certainly hasn't seen a supplemental funding bill like this. So yeah, next slide, please. So contracts, as a really basic pros and cons list, organizations want contracts with student government for the course of multiple years when they need some assistance in long-term planning, when there's some benefit to them being around for multiple years, when they think that when student government in some instances thinks that it's unnecessary to have them go through a year-by-year process. Student Legal Services is a good example of that. We know what their salaries are going to be for the next 5 years at the time of signing, and we know what their rent's going to be as well, so why not put that as part of a contract if we believe that that's something that we are going to continue to appreciate as a student body. The predictive factor is also important. This is something that a lot of organizations seeking contracts really emphasize, the ability to plan out beyond a year in advance. That's something that for a lot of our purposes in student government, we're thinking, okay, well, Pakistani Student Association is envisioning this event, next fall, and if they're not able to have it 2 falls from now, that doesn't change how they're planning. The reason that we might give out contracts is for organizations where that's not the case, for places where they need to be reserving sites multiple years in advance, whether they're booking artists that need multiple years in advance notice, and because planning larger things is hard and it takes time. So that's something to consider. It's also, so there are some cons to that. There's less oversight to contracts because it is a legally binding document. We don't have oversight anymore. We, in some instances, give out the money as a lump sum as we do to the daily. In some instances, it's divided a little bit by line items, like the student legal services contract. But either way, once the money's promised to them, it's promised to them at that amount. We're also unable to abruptly change. Obviously, COVID is a unique situation that I would not anticipate a repeating of, although I would be less confident of a change like that now than I would be 2 weeks ago because of Ukraine. But despite that, if there is some sudden change in enrollment, if there is some sudden change in what student government sees to be valuable for our dollars, that's not something that we have control anymore once we sign it away through a contract. So that is kind of difficult to clarify, to really point to where is the problem on this, where is the potential downside. Because if this is something that we're valuing now, why would we think that we won't value it in 3-5 years? That's typically the lengths of contracts that we go with. And the way to kind of show where that danger might be is in the third bullet point I have. The fixed costs limit our ability to cut broadly across the board, across all student organizations. And this is further articulated on the next slide, if you can move on. So this is a little look at what our contracts look like year by year. This is a data set that I've compiled myself. I know it's not perfect, so I'll note that for FY17, the asset cost is currently missing. I've found that since then, and I've added it to my data, but it's not reflected in the chart. So you'll see that as the years go on, we are having larger and larger sections of our budget taken up by that blue category at the top. On the left chart, that is just all fixed funding. On the right, it's broken down by kind of subtypes, and you'll see the one that is drastically growing is contracts. So what that looks like in a budget balancing session, as the one that we're going to be having next Sunday, is when we're saying we need to find another, say, $30,000 to cut, that money's no longer touchable. And so instead of coming from large line items that if we were funding them year by year, would probably get a little bit shaved off of each of them, something like sub, where they have $100,000 allocated to them every year specifically for a national performer event, or the daily where, instead of $340,000 has, $330 sound, if we were able to make that kind of negotiation. Instead, what is happening is we're having to find the negative space in the fewer and fewer organizations that are receiving money through the annual allocations process. And we're having to consider where can we take from only their budgets instead of this larger picture. So where we've cut from this year, for an example, the Student Alumni Leadership Council Conference Committee, one of the three, is an org with a very large budget. And they are, because it's a larger budget, they're one of the first ones that we're looking to when we're looking to cut. And other larger organizations, let's talk about, skydivers. We had to say in our budget balancing sessions that skydivers is an organization that we think, despite having our funding rules followed by them, we have to make the argument this is a cutting year, so we're going to be a little more on the gracious side when cutting from skydivers' budget in discretionary areas like rental equipment, and that's something that impacts skydivers especially hard because rental equipment is such a large part of their budget. And so that's kind of the point with this here. I will say, just as a note, if you're looking at the charts for the fixed student government line. The reason that varies so much between 17 and 18 is because we used to have in our bylaws that we had to add money to the events account. That is no longer the case. It hasn't been since FY18. And then you'll see the advisor salary being added in FY20. And so that's just the variation there. And then also I'll get to why there's nothing below the bar in FY22 later in the presentation. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. So current contracts. We have 6 contracts currently. We have student legal services, that's 5 years, and it goes up in years because there are set pay raises and the rent will increase with the Memorial Union over the course of 5 years. That was signed last year, so it'll be around until, I believe, the end of FY25. The Iowa State Daily is also a 5-year contract. It's $340,000 per year, with $30,000 of that being conditional funding. $10,000 is on there being a submit news button on the website. which has been met, so that's always available to them. Their $10,000 is conditional on them presenting in a Senate meeting like they did earlier this session, and $10,000 is conditional on them providing a budget breakdown, which they did for us in October. So all those criteria have been met, and until the end of FY24, I'm pretty sure, 25, they will have that $340,000 available to them each year. There is a provision in that contract that is adjusting it to enrollment. If there is a more than 10% change in enrollment from year to year, their contract will be reduced correspondingly. Although however well intended that provision might have been, it's never come to actualization because enrollment, instead of going down by 12% or something like that in a year, has gone down by 6, 7, 8%. And so despite the cumulative drop being probably close to 15% since we originally signed the contract, I don't know the exact numbers, that provision has never been triggered. So that is has been taking up a growing proportion of our budget over the course of the last few years because that provision was not worded very well. So student counseling services is the next contract we have. It's a test contract for the therapy assistance online app that we provide for them. It's about $25,000 a year. Student union board is a 3-year contract with $100,000 per year and a $25K option. They just have to come into finance committee and say, this is the national event we're having. We need this $25,000 for one of these 2 spaces, and then we'll give it to them. The MLO contract is similar, where it's over the course of a few years. They just have a set thing that we're funding them for. That's a smaller value as well. And Committee on Lectures is 3 years with $150,000 per year. One thing that all these contracts have in common is the ability to carry over money from year to year. And that's something that also is lost in oversight when we put something into a contract. When you're able to carry over as much money as the contract just says they report a number to me, and then I give it to COA to complete the carryover. They're not only are they carrying over the money from, say, FY21 to 22, but they're also guaranteed the full allocation. So that's an important note, is that carryover requests for student organizations coming through the annuals process are different from allocation requests or carryover requests coming through the contract process. If an organization like Performing Arts Council, they came into annuals yesterday and they said, we're not going to use $25,000 of this line item. And we said, awesome. So instead of funding you for $70,000 on that, we're going to fund you at $45,000 and carry over $25,000. In a contract, they get the entire allocation in addition to the carryover. So if they spend less money one year, they get to spend that money and more, or whatever is left over, and the full allocation for the next year in the following fiscal year. So here's the proposed contract that we'll be seeing tonight. It's with student engagement. Student engagement has historically been funded by Toya's office, which I cannot remember, Student Affairs, thank you. Prior to the early 2010s, it was mostly funded through Student Affairs. That changed. Student government started paying for a lot of their programs because they were student activities around then. I haven't dived super deep into that history, but if you have questions about that, I might be able to answer. It's a 3-year contract beginning at $110,000. What I'd like to say about this contract specifically is this is the best version of, I believe that this is the best version of this contract that we can see as a body. If there is an issue with carryovers, the carryover is limited at $30,000. So they're not able to just keep on carrying over money continuously. You'll see we do have a contract where the carryover number that they've reported to the finance director has grown year after year after year. I think that is essentially that organization keeping that money in their account and not spending it on students, which I don't think is an effective allocation of student activity fees. If we're taking money from students and we're putting it towards these purposes, those purposes really need to be followed, articulated, and with large carryovers, I don't think that's being realized. So there's a limit on the carryover. There's also a provision that's kind of the opposite of the one that we have with the daily, that says if there is a change in enrollment up to 5%, the amount of the contract will change correspondingly. So if it's a 4% change, then the contract decreases in value 4%. If it's 8% change, then it's only 5%. That's just so that they still have a general idea of what they're going to get funded at for the next year. It won't be drastically off. It could be over, it could be under, but it's going to be close enough. And the provision for that is on count day for the fall semester, the change from the previous fiscal year, with the first count day being this past fall. And it also combines two budgets in our online finance program. It is both student engagement and the Focused Artist Grants program. I'm not really sure why these have ever been separate. It is a program run by a person who works for student engagement, and it sure seems to fit in with the rest of the budget. So either way, I wouldn't mind these two being combined. As it stands right now, if this contract fails and they go through the annual allocations process for FY23, the budgets are separate. Finance Committee might be able to combine those on Sunday when we're doing budget balancing, just for the sake of simplicity, not because it would change the amounts or anything like that. It is a little bit of an increase between Focused Artist Grant Program, student engagement, and carryovers from FY21. For FY22, which is this fiscal year, that whole group was funded at just under $100,000. And the line items are estimations, I'll note. They're not enforceable. If you look at the language of the contract, it says this is generally what we're funding it for, and that just gives us a good idea of what the money is being spent on if it is being asked. I know that in contracts, a lot of the time we're saying, how are you spending this money? In the contract, it's just saying this is the general idea of what the purpose of it is. So are there any questions over contracts?
Acting Speaker Biggs.
Yeah, could you speak to whether or not contracts generally fund university departments and what the timeline on that has looked, the trend, I guess, over years? Contracts as well as just general funding for university departments coming out of student government funds.
Sure. So university departments that we fund would be student legal services, I believe is classified as, I don't know if it's a department or a campus organization, but I think that's what you're going for there. So between those two, through the annual allocations process, we have funded student counseling services last year and also a couple years before. The contract that we have for the Therapy Assistance Online app is with Student Counseling Services, which is a department. Could you go back a slide just to pull them up? One more. Thank you. Yes, the Daily obviously is not a department. The Multicultural Liaison Office is some kind of university level grouping. Committee on Lectures also university level grouping. Student Union Board is the only contract we currently have with a student organization.
Just speaking to I'll reserve my comments for the bill itself. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Senator Seth.
So I have two questions. The first one is just generally kind of a clarifying question. So you were saying that one of the organizations was having increasing carryovers. Was that student engagement or was that the focus group? Because I guess that information got lost in translation for me.
The increasing carryovers is a contract we currently have, not any of these groups.
Okay, so there's like no evidence or anything that like these orgs are having increasing carryovers or anything like that?
No, not at all.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that because I was a little confused there. And then my second question is with regards to focus and student engagement essentially being combined in the same contract. What, I guess, situations are there, or like why would it be useful to have focus in on this contract, with the exception of just the fact that the person who runs it works in student engagement? Like, is there any real reason otherwise to have focus in on the contract as well?
I don't think it really matters one way or another. It'd be less work for Finance Committee if that's just not a budget we have to see every year, and it has been funded very steadily. I believe the last three budgets this is off the top of my head, but I believe the last three budgets we've had for them were the exact same dollar amount. It's a set number of grants. I believe it's 16 $500 grants, and then $500 just for supplies for those grants being carried forward. Like executed, not carried forward in the financial sense. So the general idea of that is that it's stable enough and it's under student engagement. I don't know why it wouldn't be part of the contract.
Okay, thanks. That answers my question. I yield.
Are there any other questions at this time?
Debt contracts. That's the next big part. Thank you. So debt contracts are pretty unique. This is something that I'm not sure if any other university does, but because of our really excellent auditing system, where when we disperse funds at the end of the fiscal year, they come back to us if they're not spent or if they're spent incorrectly. It is possible that because of student government funding, orgs will go into debt specifically to student government. If there's not enough money in their account to be repaid, then whatever is in their account is negative. So we're not missing out on any funds as it stands right now. But if it continues on as, but if everything else is equal, then the organization will have a negative workday balance. So the way that we remedy that is for an organization to continue getting funding from student government through the annual allocations process or through bill processes if it's applicable. We will give them essentially a loan. So the principal is initially paid out. So you can see on the chart here what that will look like over the course of a few semesters. This example is a 4-semester debt contract where the principal is $1,000. So say that they were $1,000 in debt to us. We would give them that money. And so the balance here is for the debt reserve account, which is a special account we have specifically for these kinds of loans. The $1,000 is paid out, $250 is paid in every semester until the full amount has been repaid. There's no interest on the payment. That is something that student government used to do. I believe the last debt contract we had that had interest was created by the finance director in 2017 or 2018. So we haven't done that in a bit. It's something that every finance director since then has passed down as kind of like a, hey, we used to do this if you want to start it again. I'm not interested in that. I don't think that we should be punitive to clubs, and I think that's what we're doing if we're saying a past treasurer of yours made a mistake, so now you have to pay it back. I mean, if their workday account is in the negative, I don't think we're able to just completely bail out clubs. There's a reason the money is coming back to us is because they misspent it. But giving them the opportunity to pay it back, I think, is really important. And I don't think we should make a greater imposition than necessary on organizations. And then the debt reserve account is self-sustaining. So that's an account. I emailed the balance for that out this morning. You'll see I think it's at like 10,000 something, and it has always been kind of in that neighborhood as long as I've been in student government. That's because at some point a fixed number was put in there, and then for every debt contract it gets paid out, and then organizations pay back into that account. So if this debt contract passes tonight, $700-ish will be, or $775 will be taken out from that account, and then genre will be continuing to pay back into the account over the course of the next few fiscal years. So that's all I have on this slide. So pros and cons, like I said, it allows organizations to get out of debt. So if an organization has a negative workday balance, they are not able to spend money. And organizations largely are not able to really function as organizations when they're not able to spend money at all. They can't do room reservations because their account's negative. They can't pay for anything within an intramural form. If a long enough time has gone with them having a negative workday balance, I'm not sure exactly what that is. Sophie, do you know? Okay. It's a few months. If they go for long enough, then they will be suspended as a student organization, and then the organization will either repay the debt that is owed to the university, or the organization will foreclose. If that happens, that's a pretty unique situation. For a few years, that debt is then held by campus organizations accounting in a special account specifically set aside for this kind of thing, not only with organizations that have a negative debt to the university, but also for organizations that folded while having a positive workday balance. Both of those are kept in one account, and it's kept separate from everything else, and that adds up over time. And unless there's any reason to think that the organization will come back, once a point is reached where there's no reason to think that an organization has come back, I don't know what exactly their standard is, maybe the last person who is a member has graduated or something like that, then that debt will just be absorbed by the university or the profit if they did have money in their account. That's kind of what that looks like. Also, this is enforceable. Again, this is a contract. This is a contract signed by the organization treasurer and advisor. And because campus organization accounting has that kind of authority, we are able to put the debt still owed on someone's U-bill if necessary. That is, we have the ability to enforce that. And the other benefit is that orgs can continue to get funding through us while we're paying that debt. So, genre wants money for next year. They requested $1,800 through the regular allocation cycle. That's something that we saw last night. And as long as they keep up on payments, they're able to get that funding from us. And then while they're repaying us back, they have to do less fundraising for expenses that could otherwise be funded by student government. So the negatives of a debt contract is that organizations pretty frequently fail prior to the completion of debt contracts. It's about 50-50 for the completed ones we have on the next slide. But as of right now, it's about 50-50 for organizations being able to fully repay their debt. And otherwise, the money that we give them just hangs out in their account. So, and that account is then frozen until it's clear that the university, or that the club will not become active again. The second big negative is that actively enforcing them hurts students. I don't want to say that it's just deterrence, because I don't think, if you say it's just deterrence, I don't think it's actually deterrence. But I'm going to be honest, I would never consider actually billing somebody's due bill for something. Me personally as finance director, future finance directors make different decisions. But I couldn't imagine being a student, and because my organization wasn't able to properly fundraise, I personally get billed. One of these debt contracts was $7,000. I mean, obviously it's less in this circumstance, but actually enforcing a debt contract is a very serious thing to do. It's signed by the treasurer, so if the treasurer graduates, presumably it would the debt would be moved to the advisor that signed the contract. I don't know exactly how that one works, but that's something that we have the authority to do, but that I personally would be extremely uncomfortable actually doing. So here's the history of debt contracts. You'll see genre is the first one on there. Genre went into debt in 2016 of $1,100 and paid it back. I believe they were still paying when I came into Senate, so that's a pretty recent thing. And I remember during the first time that we saw them, they were one of the first bills I wrote when I was in Senate saying, okay, so you have a debt contract. What's different now? Oh, we got a new treasurer. This treasurer will be better. Then you'll see Veritas, which I don't believe is a recognized student organization anymore, but at least they completed the payment to us before they folded. Men's volleyball, a lot of sports clubs get into debt because they don't do line item transfers, saying that they're changing where they're actually going on a trip. And so you'll see men's basketball, ultimate frisbee, women's hockey, ski and snowboard, and swim. All of those are sports club council members. And also disc golf. Disc golf is a weird situation though. So for failed debt contracts, you'll see paintball. That was the $7,000 contract. All they had left to pay was $400 and they couldn't do it. Motocross paid for one semester and then folded. Ethos was voted on last year. They had an intramural form signed by the treasurer in the advisor's office when they became unrecognized, which means their Workday account could no longer do transactions. They were ready to give us $1,000, but they were unrecognized prior to the completion of that. So $1,300 has been unpaid. And then Latino Heritage Committee had $2,600 unpaid. So with the exception of paintball, it's pretty early in the contracts typically that they're not able to complete payment, that they do have to fold as an organization. Well, a lot of the times it's because organizations that come into debt with us are already not in a great financial position aside from our funding. So we'll bring their Workday balance up to zero, but if you don't have the institutional knowledge on how to fundraise, on good financial practices, getting your Workday balance to zero isn't doing you too much. So then you'll see in-progress debt contracts. One note that I do want to make here, women's hockey contacted me this morning on getting their thing paid. So I will not consider them one semester behind. But aside from that, that's all accurate. I will say the few of them that are one semester behind, that's my bad. I forgot to notify organizations last semester that this is something that needs to happen. Because there is so much turnover, treasurer to treasurer, year to year in student organizations, this is something that can just get lost for nobody's fault, aside from the treasurer who's graduated now. So I don't know. I think it's really hard to punish it. Per all of our debt contracts, we're able to say, come into finance committee. If you can't show cause for why you missed payment, you can no longer spend the student fee dollars we've allocated to you. COA, because it is a binding contract, would be able to take the money out of their accounts. And the concept of that is important to have so that this is theoretically enforceable. But again, actually doing that to a student organization has such a huge impact. I don't know if I would ever be comfortable actually doing it. But I'm a softie, so you can go ahead to the next one. Yeah, so genre's debt contract is pretty simple. It's one of the smaller ones. It's a $775 principal. It's divided up into $175 are paid for the first semester and $150 for each following semester. That's about all I got to say on the debt contracts.
Are there any questions for Finance Director Zastro? Acting Speaker Adbay.
I think I know where you'll go with this, but for the benefit of the body, if actually enforcing a debt contract is really bad and very rarely happens, what are the benefits of a debt contract? As opposed to just giving them money, if that makes sense.
Financially, there aren't really, like speaking completely candidly, but our job is to disperse the student activity fee, and we do that because we find the services that these organizations provide to students valuable. So if we just choose not to give genre this debt contract because we think that they don't deserve it or because they've been financially irresponsible in the past, what we need to recognize is that we're also depriving students of a service being able to participate in genre. And that's something that's pretty typical with these organizations. The reason that they get the debt contracts and that they pay them back, those who do at least, is because they do provide a service to students, and students are willing to pay dues, pay competitive registration fees, to participate in the club, to perform fundraisers, because they value the service. So that's what we're losing out on.
Senator Seth?
So I asked you this question earlier, but I'm going to ask it again for the benefit of the body. In your opinion, if we didn't pass a debt contract for genre, would it be likely that this would be one of those clubs that would probably fold?
I think it would be likely. It's really hard to fundraise without any money in your account. Their new advisor who they're signing on works for student engagement. So he's somebody who would have a foot in the door of knowing how to fundraise, of course, but getting the students to actually be involved. Initially, they didn't request money from us from annual allocations. I had to ask them why they didn't, because it makes their job a lot harder if they don't ask for funding through annual allocations and they change their mind, submitted a budget, because it is something that it's really hard. It's really hard to be an organization, nonetheless with $0 in your account with negative 700. So if this doesn't pass, I would think it's unlikely that they're able to get back to zero.
Okay, thank you for answering that question. I yield. Maybe.
Are there any other questions?
All right, so this is the big one. Supplemental funding. So this is something that you'll see every now and again. Actually, Jaden, would you be so excuse me, Active Vice Speaker Ulrich, would you be so kind as to go back to the two bar charts a few pages back? Yeah, last one. No, sorry. I'm being unclear. One more. There we go. Thank you. So the numbers that are in this slide is the big picture bill that we're going to pass here, will hopefully pass in a few weeks. The week after spring break is when it's going to be up for second read. And this chart is the full disbursements from the big picture bill. And that is all of our funding for all of FY23 getting sent out. So you'll notice that sometimes below the bar there are, below the zero number, there are allocations, and that's because as part of the big picture bill, we need to draw from our reserves to make it so that student organizations are able to function as they're supposed to. You'll notice that there's a pretty big jump from FY19 to FY20. I'll get to that in a second, and also why there's nothing in FY22 below the bar. But we just need, for the immediate understanding, we just need to know sometimes it's necessary to draw from our reserves to keep funding for organizations at a steady level. At the beginning of the budget cutting process, we had $475,000 over our expected income next year. And a lot of that is cuts down to P&C. We're significantly lower than that now. However, if we drew no money from this, from our reserves to pass the big picture bill, you can cut homecoming week and after dark, and we're still in the negative completely. So this is something that we absolutely need to do to some degree. Senate's job is to decide to what degree we're going to do that. Okay, thank you for going backwards. If you could go back forwards now. Thank you. So this is what it's going to look like. This is the big picture bill for FY22. This is the money that I've been in charge of this year. So you'll see there's no money going to the sewer debt reserve account. Yeah, so $8,000 was in there at the beginning of this year. There's the answer to that question. The student activity fee reserve is 6% of tuition guaranteed. It's always going to be 6%. That's in our bylaws. The regular allocations account is the money for all student organizations, both sports club council members and non-sports club council members. Both of those are bundled in there. So when we're talking about annuals hearings and we're talking about Solar Car and Rocket Shop and Cardinal Space Mining Club, all those go in there. Also, women's rugby and water polo and, so on and so forth, After Dark, Winterfest. And I'm not going to go through all these line items, but the idea here is that at the bottom of that is going to be one that's a negative, in the way the bill is currently written, negative $300,000. And that will give us the opportunity to fund the regular allocations account as high as it is, because that's just about the only one that's mobile. Everything else is a fixed cost, aside from the annual allocations account, or the regular allocations account, excuse me. Yeah, so the major bills coming up, we're going to see asset contracts. Asset is a long process that is extremely thorough. And I want to be clear about that. When I know that there's always a couple people every year who think that asset is something that's nice to have but not necessary. The work that our nonprofit coordinator, Youngquist, has put in to make sure that everything is thoroughly checked out and the services we're providing are actually assisting students is, I can't give it enough praise. It's a lot of effort to make sure that the asset funding that we're giving out really is a service to students. So we'll see the asset contracts in the next couple weeks, and I personally consider that a fixed cost. That whatever asset presents to us, I thoroughly believe is a good allocation of our money. And despite how much work I've gone through to plan out student government's budget, I couldn't pretend to say that I know everything about the asset process or that I've been in the room for most of those conversations at all. The next one we're going to see is the annual allocations bill. We'll see that on the same night as the big picture bill. Annual allocations is essentially a bill with really funny parliamentary procedure where we're going to look through the proposed budgets for those same groups, women's rugby, Pakistani Student Association, all that whole grouping of budgets. And if any of you think that Finance Committee's made a mistake along the way, or if any of you think that we ought to be funding something that's discretionary more relative to another line item that's also discretionary, that is the opportunity for Senate to make those changes. But the amount is pretty much fixed because everything else is fixed, so the total value can't really change, but how that money is allocated within that can. So we're going to pass the annual allocations bill, and then immediately following that, we'll see the big picture bill. And that bill is the one where we look at not the package of budgets that has 140 student organizations as a part of it, but this bill here that you're seeing on the screen right now. Go ahead, go to the next slide. Oops, that looks a little weird. So why is it that we didn't see any supplemental funding as part of last year's budget? There are two main reasons for this. The first one is carryovers from FY21 to 22. Because nobody was spending money in FY21 for some predictable reasons, we were able to carry over enormous budgets, almost entirely. Performing Arts Council alone was a $70,000 carryover. Student government had another like $8,000 in carryovers or something like that. And then multiply that by every large budget that didn't have performers coming into campus. And that's how you get $246,000. This year, the anticipated carryovers that I have are about $66,000. A lot of that's from Dance Marathon. Performing Arts Council came in yesterday, and I was aware of their intent to carry over before I sent out this presentation, so that was built in there. But I wouldn't expect any more large carryovers given the organizations that we have left. So that's a $200,000 difference that we need to make up. And yeah, so that's the first reason. Then you can go to the second reason. We've been over-projecting our income for the past 3 years, and this goes back to the chart way backwards where you see there's a huge difference between FY19 and FY20. The finance director who made the budget projections for FY20 created their own Excel sheet. That's what I did as well, and didn't add cells right. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Our articles of cooperation with the Graduate and Professional Student Senate say that they are allocated 2/3 of student activity fee. Well, at the time it was closer to half, but Now it's 2/3 of student activity fees for all graduate and professional students. And that total was not taken out of the total when we were projecting our income, which is fine because we have the kinds of reserves. Audits each year pull back more than that amount. So that's not of concern to us like financially or anything. It's just that it was taken out later in the year. But there is a consequence to that. And that is the money at the end of the year has been coming out of the wrong account. So we have two big accounts at play here. So you can go to the next slide. Yeah, so the first one is the fee reserve account. This is the one that's 6% of all student activity fees each year. And on a small scale, the purpose for that is enrollment projections being off. I get confidential enrollment projections from the Department of the Registrar, or the Office of the Registrar, excuse me, that is for the coming fiscal year. It's going to be wrong. It's going to be wrong, and that's okay. We have this account so that if there is up to a 6% change in enrollment, we aren't going to be in the negative in the annual allocations account. The student activity fee account, which is different from the fee reserve. The student activity fee account gets paid into over the course of the year. In August, actually, could you hit the next slide? I think that's on the next slide. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, so the fee account starts at around 0, and then it will go to like negative 2 point something million. That's because everything gets paid out of there, and the money then gets filled up over the course of the fiscal year. So you'll see from August to November, everybody paying their fall tuition, the money gets put in there. November to March, everybody paying their spring tuition gets put in there. And then let's say that the summer tuition puts you just a little bit over the top. That money would then stay in the account. And if it was just a little bit below, that money would be taken from the fee reserve. What you can see in the one on the right is what's actually been happening. It's been starting around 0, it goes down, and then as it gets paid into, we're still about $300,000 short at the end of the year. And what that means is not only is the 6% account, the fee reserve account, completely drained, but at that point, we also need to be taking from special projects. And when we have to be taking from special projects, again, that's not a problem because what we're doing right now is we're pulling from special projects prior to the bill, prior to the fiscal year. It's essentially the same thing happening, but we're going to be taking more from special projects and none from the fee reserve. So if you could go back a slide now, sorry. So the fee reserve account is important. It has two main purposes. Again, enrollment projections being off, and then also if there's an allocation error, like the women's hockey bill earlier this year where everything was filled out right, but somehow they edited a previous year's budget, and so it wasn't a part of the annual allocations bill. A very weird circumstance on that one. That should have been paid from here. And then the large-scale one is the more important one for our purposes tonight. The SIRIDE Trust Fund is something that was a mystery to me until a few weeks ago on how exactly it worked, but this is something that Senate should be talking about. I've been a member of the body for the past 2 years, and I was completely unaware of how this fund works, and it is extremely important to student government finances. So the SIRIDE, So student government has members on the SIRIDE Board of Trustees, and each year the members on the Board of Trustees, thank you, Senator Claiborne, dedicate some amount to the city, saying this is how much student government is able to contribute to SIRIDE next year, which is great. That's totally fine. And for one of two reasons, that number that they report can be wrong. First, the number that the Student Fee and Tuition Committee reports to the Board of Regents might not get accepted by the Board of Regents, as was the case between FY 21 and 22. Or enrollment can be off by either a significant or insignificant amount. But say the first 2 years in that chart between 11-12 and 12-13, that difference was because students wanted more services, so they added more routes and dug into the trust fund just a little bit. But then say that between 12 and 13 and 13-14, that mistake, less than 100,000, probably just a misestimation of enrollment. If you're off by a couple thousand, that's easily getting into the tens and tens of thousands of dollars. So the fee account we want to grow to consider things like this. You'll see the last change is about $300,000. That's a $300,000 expenditure that student government did not know it was going to be making. That is largely because of the fee freeze that's also because of a misprojection of enrollment. So it's really critical that we have this account grow so that we are prepared for something like this. And then over the course of a few years, when this account becomes robust, the fee reserve account, we're going to reach a point where we actually can spend from special projects without saying this is an untouchable account because we don't know what's going to happen. But as it stands right now, we don't have this backup, which was intended to be a backup, but for the last 3 fiscal years, there's been no money building in it because of this misprojection. So that's what's going on with the fee reserve account. Yeah, I've already talked about that. So here's the plan for this. To get back on track, my proposal, should Senate accept it, is that as part of the big picture bill, we're going to supplement around $300,000 from special projects. That is around the number that has been taken out at the end of the year. So annual expenditures, nothing is changing. This is just coming out at it'd be like 3 months before FY23 instead of the very last day of FY23, that change being made. And since we're doing it ahead of time, the fee reserve account can actually grow by that 6% of student activity fees every year. Then we'll be able to lessen that amount of the $300,000 year to year so that orgs don't feel a sharp impact on this particular year. Just to emphasize that point a little bit, it would be way, way worse if we had to cut all budgets by 15% over the course of 1 year than over the course of multiple years. I don't think I need to explain that too much, but just to make sure that orgs don't suddenly find themselves in a position they don't know how to handle. Or we'd be able to raise the student activity fee to keep funding levels similar. That's next year's choice to make. I know both candidates for president have said that they don't intend at all on raising the student activity fee. Where say that fee raises for this year get denied. The meeting for that is in June. We're not going to know until a lot of us have graduated. A lot of us won't be in session. Then the senior staff psychiatrist that we funded in FY21 is not accounted for in FY22 is not accounted for in FY23's budget for student health and wellness. That's something that I personally would feel obligated to pay for, and we just don't know about that until it happens. So please, candidates and members of this body, don't be hard against a raise of the student activity fee. Context always matters more. But that's not my choice to make. I'll be out of here. So I believe that's it I have on this section. Yeah.
Are there any other questions from members of the body? Senator Kuehler.
Okay, so I guess I'm just curious to know how this incident kind of occurred, and I think we can all appreciate that you are taking active steps to like rectify the issue, and I guess if you can speak to any methods you use to possibly prevent this from happening in the future.
Yeah, so I discovered this when I made my own. I got the enrollment projections, and the treasurer for GPSS emailed me asking how much his allocation would be, and so I made an Excel spreadsheet that looked at his multiplying cells and adding things and whatever, and I sent him the number. It was $340,000, and he said, "Wow, our allocation like more than doubled, huh?" I'm thinking it shouldn't have. So, so I went back and I looked at the sheet, and I was trying to figure out if I was doing something wrong from the previous fiscal year. So I found the sheet that was used for the past 3 on the finance director laptop, and it very clearly had just been copied year after year. The formatting was absolutely identical. I was looking at it, and the GPSS allocation was calculated wrong, but it also just was not used. I was figuring out what else might be a mistake on the sheet. And the numbers just weren't added. The GPSS allocation was never taken away from the total student activity fee revenue that was used to calculate our budget for the next fiscal year. So I guess what I'm doing to change for next year, I'll put something in the transition report encouraging the next finance director to learn from previous mistakes, including my own. I know that I haven't done this job perfectly. I think just acknowledging the mortality of everybody in student government is always helpful because I am definitely not perfect. And yeah, just encouraging the learning from mistakes, I guess.
All right, great, thank you, I yield.
Senator Mahoney.
So I just want to because obviously this is a pretty complicated topic. I just want to check my understanding here. If this mistake had never happened, and we hadn't been accidentally draining the student fee account, special project would realistically be at like 800,000 instead of 1.1 or 1.2 is it's at, right? Is that, like, we're basically correcting a finance mistake, essentially?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, if this never happened, special projects would be a lot lower. The only income to it would be from audits, which can be from 200 to 300,000 a year, depending. There's a lot depending on that. Last year was a lot higher. Yeah, so the expenditures from special projects then probably would have been a similar pace to the audits. Yeah, I think you got it, yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to check my understanding. Thank you.
Vice Speaker, or Acting Speaker Bay is out of speaking privileges. Acting Vice Speaker Ulrich.
Yeah, I yield to Acting Speaker Advait.
Thank you very much. This is going to be short. Finance Director Zastro, could you perhaps dive into the numbers a little more? I heard you about a $340,000 value out there, but do you know what the breakdown is for how much we've been under or over budgeting, I suppose, depending on the semantics of it, and whether the $300,000 would essentially wipe out all of the discrepancies that we have?
Sure, I can give you the breakdown of that. Give me 1 second. A big old spreadsheet. Okay, so actually, for visualization, if you could go back to the same slide with the 6 bar graphs next to each other in the first part of it, that'd probably be helpful, yeah. So so for the numbers below the bar, the 6% number is about, I keep hitting this mic, sorry, is about $140,000. So for example of a year that is just like a straight up mischeck of enrollment, in FY18. Oh, here we go. FY19, the take from the year-end fee reserve is negative 17,000. You make a mistake in enrollment, that's probably only a few hundred people mistake, and you get 17,000. That is relatively common. That is what the account should look like. But for FY21, we had the entire fee reserve account drained. That's 160,000. And we also had to take 210 from special projects, 210,000. In FY20, the year reserve account or the fee reserve account was shorted 148,000, and special projects was drained 248,000. So yeah, these are very significant numbers. That's does that answer your question?
Would I be correct in just adding up all of those to get a picture of how we've been spending money as opposed to the money we thought we had?
For any one fiscal year, sure. But the ideal situation, say FY20 is nice because if you add those two, it's about 400,000. For FY20, ideally, instead of the 400,000 below the bar being split between those two accounts, it's only coming from special projects. That's the difference. So it would be allocated before the year instead of being taken out at the end of the year to make up for the gap in the annual allocations account.
Any other questions at this time? Do you have anything else, Finance Director Zastro?
Oh, I'm going to speak during open forum.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Otherwise, we will move on from our program. Okay. Then we will move on to the next item on our agenda, open forum. Open forum is an opportunity for members of the public to come and speak on issues relevant to the student body. Is there anyone here for open forum? And if so, please approach the podium, state your name and the organization or college you represent.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mason Zastro. I'm a senior in political science, philosophy, and sociology. Yeah, so y'all know me. I would just like to take a second reading the rules minutes from last night. I would harshly disagree with the way that Rules Committee went about reviewing these two contracts. As a former member of Rules Committee on the committee, and you all have heard me say this before, but it needs reiterating, I think that the job of Rules is very narrowly tailored to putting a bill in the best position it could be in to pass. If you look at the minutes from last night, I think that there was a lot of opinion from the members about the actual content of the bills that was being considered when the motions were being made. the idea that rules should have some kind of vested interest in the financial future of student government. Obviously, all the senators on the committee as senators have that interest, and they ought to be recognizing that interest in speaking about it on the Senate floor. But I believe the Senate floor is the appropriate place to voice that concern. Specifically, neither genre nor student engagement was asked to come, so they were not able to argue their own case before the committee. We always have organizations come to Finance Committee when we're looking at their budgets because we want them to be able to advocate for themselves. I don't believe that was present, and especially without that being present, I don't think it was appropriate for Rules Committee to have sent those bills unfavorably. I know that the issue with genres was much more narrowly tailored to the language of the bill, if you've read their minutes, but for student engagement, I don't believe that's the case, and so I would respectfully ask the body to not consider Rules' sending of the student engagement contract unfavorably in the consideration of tonight's debate. Thank you.
All right. Is anyone else here for open forum? Sure. Yeah, go ahead and approach the podium. You'll have 10 minutes to speak. Please state your name for the body.
Hello, ISU Student Senate. My name is EJ Wallace. I am the Iowa State Manager for Save the Children Action Network. We are the political advocacy arm of Save the Children, the over 100-year-old advocacy NGO for children. Most recently, we're well known for our efforts to protect and help place refugees in the Afghan crisis. We also have done a lot of work to ensure bipartisan support for investing in early childhood education and childcare. Since 2014, Save the Children Action Network has been in Iowa. I was one of the first field hires with SCAN, and it's been my job to identify, recruit, and train volunteer leaders in our community to hold policymakers accountable for children and make sure that the issues that are really important to children in their development are brought to lawmakers. And so we do that through a variety of different ways. We educate the community on the needs to invest in early childhood education, to ensure that children seeking asylum at the southern border are treated with dignity and respect, to ensure that foreign assistance gets to children so that they are protected and they are educated. So we're watching very closely with the developments that are happening in Ukraine and how we can be supportive in terms of fundraising, as well as here in the U.S. when and if we do receive refugees here. So educating our community on the importance of those issues, and then also talking to elected leaders and educating them, one, about the issues, but then two, supporting good policy that helps children survive and thrive. And then also hold policymakers accountable to promises that they make on the campaign trail. So every caucus season, we mobilize volunteers to attend candidate forums, ask tough questions. We teach students and volunteers how to write letters to the editor, speak to press. And since 2015, Save the Children Action Network has been through either a club, which has gone kind of off and on, depending on how many students are involved, or direct student volunteers, has been here at Iowa State University, and students have gone on to be incredible community leaders in Iowa as well as other states, and gone on to use their experience with Save the Children and Save the Children Action Network to pad their resumes, use on their CV. We also offer a student ambassador program, which is an official designation. It comes with an application and things like that. I have some information on that if folks are interested. But that includes a chance to go to Washington, D.C. for free. We provide them with room and board over 3 days worth of workshops. They meet student ambassadors from around the country, around the world, and we give them an opportunity to lobby Congress, to talk to them about issues that matter to them, teach them how to use their personal story as an effective way to inform policy. And actually, students have gone on to, from that experience, to actually work in congressional offices. A former ISU student ambassador is actually in Senator Grassley's office right now, taking phone calls. So I just thought I'd give this an opportunity to share this with the student body, and allow myself to be a resource for this community. Again, I want to really focus on the fact that we are bipartisan. We work with Democrats, Republicans, Independents. to be frank, they all kind of need a little work, but we really try to strive to come up with common sense solutions that have bipartisan support on the State House as well as in the federal. So I'll go ahead and yield the rest of my time to any questions or interest. If anybody's heard of SCAN or Save the Children Action Network? I see some nodding. Have you heard about us? I've heard of it. Okay, right. What have you heard? Ah, I like that. That's good. Some of our student ambassadors, I believe, have served on Student Senate, but I can't come up with the names right now. Go ahead. Lucy, yes. Lucy was an earlier student ambassador of mine and continues to be somebody that I check in with. Yeah, that's really great. But if anybody on this body is interested in contacting me, my email is ewallace@savechildren.org. That's ewallace, WALLACE, @savechildren.org. I also, as a former college student, it's been over 10 years now, one of the things that I was really engaged in was getting good grades, getting on the Sociological Honor Society at Drake University. I was really proud of that, and I couldn't find a job when I graduated. And the main reason why is because people in the workforce that are hiring want to know what your community engagement was like and how have you demonstrated leadership when you were in school. I don't think we'll have a problem with folks here. You guys have demonstrated leadership, but there's a lot of students that sort of get put on the blinders and do their homework, and then afterwards they don't have a lot of real world experience. So if folks are interested in things like fundraising, community organizing, I'm a community organizer of 15 years, political advocacy or politics, issue advocacy, things like that, press, writing, things of that nature. SCAN does that and provides that training for free. You guys talked about the budget. SCAN fronts a lot of the costs for our student engagement. I don't think I've ever engaged in the funds that the SAC has offered us. Not because we didn't want to. It's just part of our program to fund the engagement. So, any other questions, reactions? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. Again, ewallace@savechildren.org, and I would be happy to be a resource for this body or any student that's interested. And I'll be hanging out for a while afterwards, too. Thank you for the time.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else here for open forum? All right, seeing no one, will go ahead and go on to adopting the agenda for tonight. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda? Acting Speaker Debate. All right, it's been moved and seconded to add this particular bill to the agenda. Is there any objection? All right, it's been added. Senator Mays, excuse me. All right, is there any objection to doing so? Both been added.
Move to add Senator Schnepp to the roll.
Is there any objection to doing so? All right, you've been added as well.
Move to adopt tonight's agenda.
It's been, all right. Senator Rulli.
Move to add John Ardette contract to the top of internal matters general orders.
All right, is there a second? All right, there's been a motion to add the John Ardette contract to the top of internal matters special orders, correct? General orders, excuse me. All right, is there any objection to doing so? All right, it's been moved. Are there any other changes to tonight's agenda? All right, is there a second? All right, is there any objection to adopting tonight's agenda as it stands? All right. Go ahead and go on to approval of minutes from last week. Are there any changes to last week's minutes? It's been moved and seconded. Is there any objection to adopting last week's minutes? All right, they've been adopted. Next, we'll go into committee reports, starting with rules with Acting Speaker Debate.
Okay, so Rules had its meeting yesterday. We covered the two contracts that we saw, and then we also did some internal committee stuff regarding bylaw and Senate rules review, and then we also looked at a confirmation for Senate. That is for the Frederickson Court residency area. That is former Chief Justice Brick, who is right there. and you'll be seeing them later tonight. I'm going to speak on the contracts really quickly. Rules sent both of those unfavorably by a unanimous vote. The minutes were sent out last night. They lay in detail the discussion that occurred in the committee. Just to sort of give a quick overview, members within the rules had a couple concerns about the contract itself. As Finance Director Zastro said, some were about the substance of the contract. However, there were also concerns about the language of the contract itself. I will not go into detail right now. I'll save that for discussion on the bill itself, but I have a whole thing with everything highlighted. The genre contract was purely on the language. There was some language that we thought was not specific enough, and that's why it was sent unfavorably. As always, as we're getting to the discussion itself, I think you're more than welcome to ask questions to members that were present. And then just a quick note on what being sent unfavorably means. It doesn't affect the ability of Senate to make decisions about the bill. It doesn't necessarily indicate the presence of militant opposition within the committee. Members may change their positions as new information makes itself available. No representatives were at yesterday's meeting, unfortunately. More questions on that can be posed to the chair of the committee itself. That is really all I have now. I will yield for questions.
Are there any questions for Rules Committee? All right, next we'll go on to Finance Committee with Finance Director Zastro.
Yeah, so we have had a very busy week. We had SEC hearings on Saturday, hearings on Sunday, and then hearings yesterday as well. So we were able to fit everything in yesterday. For the bills we were seeing today, student engagement contracts was sent no bias. Members of the body thought that a large enough contract should have full discussion in front of everybody. Genres debt contract was sent favorably with no concerns. Funding books for lectures, I don't know what the actual title of that bill is, I'm sorry. Is that actually it? Oh, that's fantastic. Yes, that was sent favorably, and supplementing the annual account. The account allocations for next fiscal year was sent no bias with a small amendment, just adding that it's coming from special projects to the bill. Aside from that, our last day of hearings is this Sunday, and also budget balancing, which is why I would just like to say we do need to pass or not pass, if that is what the body decides, the genre debt contract tonight. This cannot be amended and reintroduced because we need to know before hearings, before the bill for annual allocations is introduced next week, what the value of genre's budget will be. So that's just why it's really important to get this passed. Same for student engagement. It can't be kicked down the line. This is the latest we could have introduced it. Thank you.
All right, any questions for Finance Director Zastro? All right, next we'll go on to PR Committee with Director Garman.
Evening, everyone. Last night, PR Committee had our meeting, and then just a couple things that came out of that. Christian will be setting up a tabling for next Tuesday from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m., or not 7 p.m., 2 p.m. So please sign up for that. For you, if some of you need outreach credits, or if you already completed your outreach credits, please continue helping the PR Committee with doing outreach things. And then just if you haven't already done the Senate recap for our social media, please sign up for the last few meetings of the remainder of this session. You can find that on the MIS. And then the last newsletter of my term will go out at the end of March. It'll just kind of be the election recap, introducing new senators and stuff like that. And then we are working with Aliana still to get the inclusive language training done for the PR Committee. And then in regards to the PR bill that's up tonight for first read, we are preparing new outreach things that you will be hearing later on. But thanks.
Any questions for PR Committee? All right, next we'll go on to the Committee on Student Diversity with Director Booman.
Hi, everyone. Not a whole lot going on. I mean, I lied. I guess there kind of is. So last week we had the multicultural town hall. There was snow. Lovely. Was it last week? Oh my gosh, I have no concept of time anymore. It did go well, considering we did have a low turnout. For those of you who came, I really appreciate it. I appreciate your attention and your positive responses to coming and listening to the students who did attend and who did speak. We are hoping to host another one between the second or third week of April before Dead Week, so that will be coming out sometime after break. I will be giving the inclusive language presentation to the fashion show producers this coming Sunday, and then hopefully to Trend Magazine next week, just to talk about inclusivity inclusive language and inclusivity as a whole in the fashion industry, and just diversity and representation as a whole as well. We also, I'm working with our lovely Sophia, and I hopefully will have the inclusive language presentation up and available for all departments, faculty, and staff by the end of the year. So I know a couple of people in the MU requested that as well. So hopefully those will be going out. As Bryce said, we will be working with PR soon to give them the inclusive language presentation. And we sat a wonderful member to our committee last week. So that's all from me.
Any questions for Director Booman? All right, we'll go ahead and go on to Student Initiatives Committee with Senator Staff.
Howdy, folks. It's been busy times in Student Initiatives Committee. Last Sunday, we had our first session of the mental health first aid training. Lower turnout than we would have liked, but it went really well. I had a really good time. I learned a lot, so I really enjoyed it. Big thanks to Senator Mahoney for really organizing that and putting that together. The second session will be in March, so looking forward to that. And then, yes, the dogs will be there in the March session. So if you like dogs, consider going. They're really cute. There's 2 of them. And then tomorrow, I've sent you 2 emails this week about it, is the trivia night in the MU in room 3560 from 6 to 8 p.m. We purchased a bunch of prizes with our lovely finance director, Zashiro, on Saturday, and they're pretty lit prizes, so you should definitely show up tomorrow. Tell your friends, have your friends tell their friends, please. We have a lot of things that we would like to give away, and trivia is just generally fun. We spent a lot of time writing the questions, so it'll be a good time. Please come. And finally, we have a bill up tonight to seat Monty to Student Initiatives Committee, so that'll be coming up very soon. If you have any questions, just let me know.
Are there any questions for Student Initiatives Committee? All righty, we'll go on to Civic Engagement Committee. Senator Paulson is not present as the vice chair here. Is there a member of Civic Engagement that is willing to speak? Okay. Are there any questions for any members of Civic Engagement? Okay. We'll go ahead and go on to comments from our Student Government Advisor.
Hello, everyone. I will keep this brief. First and foremost, if you got a t-shirt, please come pick it up from my office. My office is in the Student Engagement office across from Panda Express. Yeah, that's it. Beyond that, make sure that you are paying attention tonight. A lot of stuff's happening. Make sure you're paying attention every time we're in Senate. This is, you're making a lot of decisions for a lot of things over the variety of weeks that you are in term, so just kind of keep that in mind.
Are there any questions for Sophia? Go ahead and move on to comments from the Judicial Branch. Is there a representative from the Judicial Branch here? Is there a representative from the Election Commission here? Alrighty. We'll go ahead and move on then to comments from the Executive Branch with President Campbell.
Hey, good evening. Happy election days. Hope everyone's had a strong week. And I don't know if you're looking forward to the upcoming weekend more than you are reminiscing about the past weekend, but regardless, hope there's fun things you're enjoying in your life outside of school and student government. A couple meetings recently. We had met with President Winterstein on Monday. It was a fantastic conversation about a couple different things on campus, and I'll include them with more details in my executive update. I don't quite have it ready to send out tonight. Additionally, last Friday we met with Dean Sharon Evans. She's wonderful. We had a great conversation also about the recent, about a lot of things, but we also touched on the recent incident regarding Yik Yak that was reported through the Iowa State Daily as well as a couple other campus sources, and more information can be found on the Iowa State Police Department's Twitter and the news service account through Iowa State. Last Thursday, some members of student government joined. I had reached out to a number of campus community, like students and people within our campus community to help provide input on the 9-year strategy that's being developed through 2031 from Iowa State. That's come out of the Office of the Vice President of Research at Iowa State, and they're doing a nice job pulling in a lot of perspectives from across not only the Ames community, but across the state of Iowa, and a lot of different stakeholders within our Iowa State about who we help learn throughout the entire touch points, future, current, and like existing alumni too. So that was one. I moderated a session for students last week about the strategy. Otherwise, we've had a Transportation Advisory Council meeting. They talk about transportation on campus, from everything from bicycles to parking on campus. The Board of Regents recently had conversations about parking rates, and so that was discussed. Last week, both Athletics Council met and the Student Advisory Athletics Board met. We work with Jamie Pollard to understand student interaction with the athletic departments. That comes in the form of season tickets for basketball and football, as well as admission to games. We talked about activation rates for tickets. So for all of us that maybe buy men's basketball and football tickets, what is the activation rate and how many students that purchase them, use them, or transfer them, things like that. Otherwise, we just wanted to say thank you to our Director Boomin, Director Sun, and Senator Adagarla for a wonderful multicultural town hall discussion. I really appreciated the topics that you presented to the students there, and I took a lot of away, and I think a lot of others did too. Finally, this is some exciting opportunity we have been asked to pass on. This is my last announcement for tonight. Please take a look at this. I think you'll find it of interest, and if it applies to you, I'd encourage you. This Iowa State University Student Health and Wellbeing Focus Group study, if you participate and if you're eligible to participate, comes with a $75 Visa gift card. So take a look at that. More information will be in the update tonight in the Campbell Scoop. And if you have any questions, let me know. I'm also happy to talk about funding books for the lecture series related to financial literacy tonight. Vice President Decker has been talking and working with Amanda from Lectures about that frequently. She's out in Washington, D.C. with the Iowa Soybean Association tonight and is unable to be with us. So let me know if you have questions on that or regarding the exec update. Thank you.
Any questions for President Campbell? All right, we'll go ahead and move on to the top of our bills tonight. 2021-3-015F, funding books for lecture series events with Senator Wagmeister.
As is customary with finance bills, I will allow the person that this bill is directed for to speak on it. So I will throw it back to Julia, Sophia, whoever. All right, President Campbell.
Sure. If you've had the chance to read through this bill, it's the focal point is financial literacy. Number one, so that what's highlighted and it's linked there, financial literacy is one of the core competency skills for the state of Iowa in kindergarten through 12th grade in the state of Iowa. To continue that conversation into our collegiate years, into higher education, we want to bring a speaker who is well-versed in this area. You can learn more about him. We're happy to pass along any information. But his name is Adam Carroll. We're really excited about him coming to speak in April during National Financial Literacy Month. This is part of something that we really want to encourage students on campus to take advantage of what he'll bring in terms of wisdom and expertise. These books are going to be given away to students that are coming into the doors. There will be a set determined amount of books that'll be given away to students that come in, and then potentially books that'll remain for students who ask questions at the end. So if you maybe weren't one of the first 30 students in, you might get the chance for a question, 30 or 40. So that's my understanding now. In all the books might have, between conversations with Megan and Amanda, been allocated to the first 50 people in. But this would be students, and they would get to take home Adam Carroll's book that he's written, Mastery of Money. I've had the chance to skim through it, and it's got a lot of great stuff. And he's also, he's not an Iowa State alum, but he's a huge Cyclone supporter, and he's from the Des Moines area. So he also is a local Iowa resident and is absolutely ecstatic to be on campus to give this talk.
Yeah, President Campbell, I have a couple questions. First off, where would the money be transferred to for this?
To my understanding, the books would be purchased. Amanda's helping us out with that, but they would be bought through either lectures or student government, and then delivered and dispersed through lectures, and we'll be there too. Do you have a specific account, or is that what you're asking me?
Yeah.
Have you? I'm not entirely sure. I wasn't involved in that conversation initially, but I can get back to you on that.
I suppose part of it would also be where are the books being purchased from? Is it like Amazon? Is it from Adam? Is it from, or has that not been decided yet?
So it has been decided. This has been with Megan and Amanda in a lecture series. I can send a text to Megan and ask, but the $7.50 is a determined location and set price for where they're able to purchase them from. And I think that the Iowa State bookstore, at one point I'd heard that they'd be housing them, so, or maybe they would be purchased through there. But I don't have solidified answer for you. But I know there is someone that does.
Okay, I will yield my opening comments.
All right, now we'll enter into debate. Acting Speaker debate.
This is a question for Finance Director Zastro. I noticed that the money for this bill is coming out of the Senate discretionary account. Bylaw 9.7.1.1 specifically states the Senate discretionary account should be used to allocate funds to organizations. The lecture series is not a student organization. It is a university entity. Regardless, even if that isn't a factor, it looks like this money is being asked. This ask is coming out through an executive initiative, and I was just curious as to why we weren't using the executive initiative account to fund this as opposed to running it through Senate discretionary.
It's less than $400. I don't think it matters really which account it's put through. It could go through executive at this point, though. We're not going to have a cabinet meeting for, I think, 3 weeks. So, are we having one next week? Okay. So, I guess we could executive next week. I don't think it matters, though, is my opinion. Does that answer your multiple questions?
Senator Rulli, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I asked this in finance yesterday. I was like, why? I don't know if the executive initiative account was considered. I guess I direct that more towards Campbell, President Decker, President Campbell. But seeing as Senate discretionary we're not like running up to our limit. Typically, this is fine at this point in the year.
Okay. President Campbell, do you have anything to speak on this or? FD Zastro?
I think the answer to this would be she asked me what account to take it from, and I had mono during that meeting and was really out of it. So I said just kind of whichever. So.
Okay. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah, I guess we have an executive initiative account for a reason, and I can't. Do you know when the last time it was used, FD Zastro?
Sorry?
Do you know when the last time we used that we used the account?
I think some of it was used last year. I'm not sure.
Okay.
We're happy to consider any angle. There's no specific reason it went this avenue. We had conversations. It is an amount less than $400, and regarding that, we believe that financial literacy extends beyond just our initiative as a Campbell Decker administration in the executive branch, and would absolutely want to bring anyone who has interest in this from the Senate onto this. But if the Senate decides that it's better kept in the executive initiative account, we're more than fine with that too.
I guess where I stand is we can fund this once. It's not a big deal, but it's important to note that we have accounts for a reason. And it's either we should use the exec initiative account, or if we're not using it, as it seems to be the case at least for a long time, in the interest of simplicity, we should look at eliminating that account and just move everything to Senate initiatives instead, because we haven't used it for over a year, it would seem. I yield call to question.
All right.
Withdraw.
All right, we'll enter back into debate. Senator Seth.
So I have a question. I guess I would direct this to President Campbell. So what is the expected attendance on this event? Because to me, at least in a lot of the lectures that I've been to, like 50 students coming is quite a number of students. And so I'm just concerned that if we fund 50 of these books, will we actually use all 50 of these books? Like, will there be enough students at this lecture to actually give away these books? And if not, then are there any contingency plans as to what to do with them, say we have extra at the end of the lecture?
I can take this one quick. I don't have exact data for you on the average attendance of lectures. Perhaps Senator Vate would maybe, or the other co-chair, Chief of Staff Ludwig, would maybe be more readily to pull that information from you, as if on cue. But regarding that, we haven't identified an exact plan, as if not every book gets allocated during that meeting, but this would be a campus effort. Right now we're working with Amanda. Megan is actually meeting with Amanda next week. This has really been what she's been heading, to understand the different delivery methods of information related to how we can spread word about the lecture. It's going to go out to departments. We'll have an emphasis on departments in the business college, as well as liberal arts with economics and things like that. But we're open to suggestions if people have books, but we do not believe that there will be an issue getting these books passed out in the hands of students that have an interest in this topic. We're also looking, right now we are in the process of the Office of Student Financial Aid and Office of Student Financial Success tabling before the event as students come in, and providing resources on things such as exit counseling towards the end of the school year and other financial literacy resources as it relates to Iowa State Extension and some of the programs they have that are currently existing too.
Yeah, so I just have one more follow-up question. So what added value do you think giving out copies of this book would bring to the lecture? Like, what is the reasoning behind wanting to have a book giveaway at this lecture?
I think it's tremendous value. I've attended a variety of conferences where the speaker has given away their books, or they've been funded by the conference. And I actually have 2 or 3 signed copies. One of a financial literacy book at home that I got at a Farm Her conference 2 years ago or 3 years ago in Ankeny, Iowa. I've referred to it multiple times. It's a very thin book, so it's not a long, complex read, but rather a toolkit that I believe people can refer to back over the course of their lifetime. So I believe there is tremendous value. Not only are you going to attend the lecture, but it'll be an experiential learning as you read to come back, and you'll be able to tie that learning throughout a period longer than just the duration of a 90 or 120-minute lecture.
Okay,
Thanks
thank
for your question.
I yield.
Senator Claiborne.
I would like to yield my time to Director Booman.
Hello, is it on? Okay, good. A little bit of follow-up for Senator Seth. I do think that these books, regardless of whether we have a surplus or not, are going to be of great value. If we do have surplus, I know many multicultural students who struggle with financial literacy, and sometimes speaking with the advisors is not always comfortable for them. These kinds of toolkits and education that is, one, not only free to them, but they are able to be offered in a setting such as university lectures, help students become more comfortable. And as President Campbell said, they are just a toolkit. These act as guidelines. I know that I have also a few financial literacy books that I received in high school, and then I still refer to them if I do need the assistance, and I know the other students may also feel the same way. So even if we do have a surplus, I do think that they will be utilized, and I know that there are students who would like them.
All right, Senator Wagmeister, as the author of the bill, you cannot speak during debate.
May I make a motion? Okay, I move to amend the enacted clause to read, transferred from the Senate discretionary account to lectures.
All right, there's been a motion. I'll wait for that to be reflected on the screen. Would you repeat the motion for the body, Senator Wagmeister?
From the Senate discretionary account to lectures or committee on lectures, whichever way Acting Speaker Vate would prefer that it be worded.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. The language on the screen is moved and seconded. All right, we'll enter into debate on that. Senator Wagmeister?
Yeah, just from prior conversation with Finance Director Zastro, on his end of things, this is what makes it easiest on the entire process, like in an accounting sense and P-card swiping sense.
Okay. Do you yield? But Acting Speaker Vate?
I'll just make a secondary amendment to have it say to the Committee on Lectures.
All right, is there a second?
And ask unanimous consent that it be adopted.
All right, has there been a second? Okay, if there's no objection to adopting that secondary amendment by way of unanimous consent, all right, the It's been adopted into the amendment. Back on. All right, question's been called and seconded on the regular amendment. We'll now enter into a voting period. Unanimous consent has been called for. Is there any objection to adopting such an amendment by way of unanimous consent? All right, it's been adopted into the bill.
Second.
Questions has been called on the bill as a whole and seconded. We will now go into a voting period. This is a finance bill, so it'll require 2/3. And I'll go ahead and go roll call. Excuse me, Acting Speaker Debate.
Yes.
Senator Adegarla? Ulrich?
Yes.
Becker?
Yes.
Brecht? Carter? Claiborne? DeVore?
Yes.
Haas? Bueller? Larson? Mahoney?
Yes.
Mascar? Mays? McCready?
Yes.
Tell? Ruley? Knapp? Seth? Sayway? Skaggs? Me? Strickland?
Yes.
Thornton? Wagmeister? All right. The vote of 23 to 0, the bill passes. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to our next bill under Internal Matters Special Orders 2021-3-035 SD, seating senators representing the residency area of Frederickson Court with Vice Speaker Debate.
So on Monday, if the nominee would like to start heading up to the podium. On Monday, Frederickson Court Community Council made a nomination for the Frederickson Court seat that was vacated when former Senator Simmons left their position to study abroad. You all know Andrew, but I'll let Andrew speak to his qualifications and his thoughts tonight.
Hi, everyone. You hopefully know me. My name is Andrew Brick. I am a junior in political science, and I was the Chief Justice for the majority of this year. I don't really have anything much prepared to say, so I guess I'm open to questions now.
So before I yield, I'd just like to note that considering we had a really long period of program, it was like an hour and 20 minutes before we got to our bills. I just ask everyone to keep questions and comments precise, concise, and non-superfluous on all bills after this point. I yield.
Are there any questions from the body? Acting Speaker Debate. Excuse me, sorry, as the author of the bill, you cannot speak unless someone yields you time. Senator Ruley?
Very briefly, could you speak to why you're pursuing a Senate seat, what got you here from the court, and what you're planning to do with the position?
Sure. So really simple general overview of why I want to be on Senate. The issue, not the issue with the court, but I guess the issue with courts in general is they are a reactive body. You go before a court because you have a problem. It's a very specific problem on this question of law, and you rule one way or the other based not necessarily on your own moral or ethical discretion, but because you want to. The law, in your opinion, prescribes an outcome one way or the other. While that's obviously a very important role, it is very limiting in what you can do for your own personal opinions and beliefs on such, whereas, in my opinion, being in the Senate is much closer to the role of, I guess, like a lawyer, of an advocate of, I have a position and I want to advocate it to the fullest of my abilities. And so I want to put my opinions and the feelings of my constituents into the law. So that's really what interested me about the Senate the most, and that's why I'm here today.
Call the question.
Question's been called and seconded. We'll now go into a voting period. Unanimous consent has been called for. Is there any objection to approving the bill by way of unanimous consent? All right, congratulations. Now Chief Justice Cecil will go ahead and administer the oath.
Is it even necessary? Like, he knows it.
It's necessary.
How things change.
You know it better than me. So, yeah. Go swear.
Say it.
Repeat after me. I solemnly swear or affirm
I solemnly swear or affirm
to execute the duties of my position
to execute the duties of my position
as prescribed in the Constitution and laws of the government
as prescribed in the Constitution and laws of the government
for the benefit of all students.
for the benefit of all students.
Congratulations, Senator.
Thank you very much.
Is there a motion to add Senator Bruick to the roll?
So motion.
Any objection? All right, he's been added to the roll. All right, next we'll go on to 2021-3-036 SG, confirming a senator to Student Initiatives Committee with Senator Staff.
So Senator Moskar, would you approach the podium and tell the body a little bit about why you want to be in Student Initiatives Committee, what projects you might be interested in working on in the committee, and then talk a little bit about your qualifications?
My name is Mansi. I'm a freshman in computer science. I approached Senator Seth to be a part of this committee. I'm aware of the various projects that this committee works on, and I'm really interested in being a part of them. I talked to Senator Seth about it. Some of the projects that I'm interested in is the any mental health projects, especially the Wolves and Wellness that they're currently working on. Take Back the Night is something that I recently learned about, and I'm really interested in being a part of that too. What other questions do you have?
Just like your qualifications as well.
So, I'm a senator in student government. I just want to get more involved, be a part of the projects, not only do the projects, but actively maybe even bring newer projects to the table.
Is this still my speaking privilege?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. The interview yesterday went really well. I think Senator Moskar is really qualified to be on this committee. She has a lot of ideas. She approached me about an idea that I didn't know about that apparently we did before I even got here. So she's done her research. She knows what's going on. So I'm a little biased, but I encourage you all to vote yes. I will yield.
Now we'll enter into debate. All right, question's been called and seconded, and I'll enter into a voting period. Yes, consent has been called for. Is there any objection to adopting the bill by way of unanimous consent? All right, congratulations. All right, we will now move on to general orders. Excuse me, just a moment. 2021-3-031 SA, the genre debt contract with Senator Claiborne.
Yeah, so we have already talked about this, but if the representatives from genre want to go up to the podium and talk about how you got into debt and then what you will do to fix it.
In the meantime, a reminder for the body, please remember to keep technology use limited to student government use.
Hi, I'm Hassan Raif. I'm the president of Genre Club. The story of how we got into debt is kind of long. I'll try to keep it brief. So I became the president of Genre Club in May of 2020. And so at that time, the budget for fiscal year 21 had been submitted and approved prior to me getting involved on the exec team in the club. And in that budget, there was about, I think, $1,800 requested for capital items. And then there is some money requested for venue rentals as well. We use that money for to rent a rehearsal space. If you don't know, Genre is a club that helps people form bands with other students, and so to kind of help them get going, we want to offer a place where they can rehearse, play drums, guitar, be loud. And so when I came on, the treasurer, I guess it was never conveyed to me that we had $1,800 worth of money set aside for capital expenses. The treasurer at the time, this is Connor. The treasurer at the time was, it was not Connor, it was past treasurer. His name is Ben. yeah, he never, like, I guess conveyed to me that we had this money to spend. And it was, so it didn't get spent. So what happened to put us into debt is we overspent on the rehearsal space. We didn't spend more money than we were allocated from student government, but we dipped into that capital expenses I wasn't aware of, and he just said, we're good, we have enough money. We ended the semester with a positive balance in our account. And so because those line items didn't get spent from the capital expenses during the summer, those unspent line item funds went back to student government. That put our account negative, I believe like $776 was the deficit. Now, there's usually an email that goes out to the treasurer when the account goes negative. We didn't get this email because Ben had graduated. Connor was not, officially added, installed as treasurer until early August. And so that email went to the old treasurer, who either didn't see it or just didn't let us know. So we were unaware at the time that we were negative. We found out later in the semester when we tried to submit a intramural transfer payment form for an event. We assumed we had money in the account, which I guess is kind of on us for not checking, but because we were positive at the end of last semester, we didn't know that there were line items that got taken out. And then so we, was made aware of the deficit partway through fall semester when that intramural payment form bounced. That's kind of the gist of it. Are there any questions about this that I can answer?
So your speaking privileges.
And then can you just provide information on what you will do to get this paid off through these few semesters?
Yeah, sure. So we have a couple of fundraising initiatives planned. I guess first off, we collect dues for members who make use of the club's resources, the rehearsal space, equipment rental, stuff like that. Those dues are $10 per person per semester, and we have about 15 to 20 active due-paying members as of now. In addition to that, as far as fundraising goes, we are planning to put on, a fundraising concert, hopefully this spring. In addition to that, there's a production company based in Ankeny that we're friendly with, and we're going to try to work with them to have some members of genre donate their time to working events, stagehands, general labor, and the money generated from their work goes to be donated to the club. In addition to that, we're planning to reach out to Cyclone Athletics. We've heard they have some sort of program where
30 seconds.
Thank you. A similar deal where members of the club can volunteer their time to help sell concessions. Money goes to the club. I yield.
Do you yield, Senator Claiborne? Senator Mahoney?
I don't actually have a question. I just want to advocate for Genre Club. I worked with them in 2017 as part of Caroline Crashtacular when I was executive event director for that, and we had a bunch of their bands come play. They're fantastic, and they do really help a lot of these bands get formed. I really love them, and I would really hate to see them not really be able to do anything this year. Despite rules sending it unfavorably and me being a member of said committee, I still intend to vote yes tonight, and I would encourage everyone else to because, well, it's kind of a make or break thing for them, unfortunately. So I would really love to continue to see them be able to be as effective as they are and not necessarily be punished for, well, we're correcting our own accounting mistake potentially later tonight. And so I understand accounting mistakes happen at other levels too. And so I would be very inclined to help them with their accounting mistake, essentially.
Senator Kuehler?
Just a question.
So I guess I understand that mistakes happen, and I guess if I'm wondering if you're planning on implementing any measures to ensure that this sort of mistake doesn't happen again. If I'm correct, it kind of seems like it was a communications issue.
Yeah, absolutely. The main thing we're going to be doing is creating transition documents. Up until this point, there were no transition documents, and
When I came on in May of 2020, right in the middle of COVID, there's, I guess, a big lack of communication because the club couldn't be very active. We're based around, live music, live performances, which was kind of dead at the time. So we didn't have as much participation as I would have liked to have seen from the previous exec team at that time. And so we're going to create transition documents outlining, the steps. Kind of part of the confusion was we just, didn't understand how the whole finance funding thing worked. And so we want to lay that out in a transition document. These are the things you got to look out for. This is what you got to do, et cetera.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying that. I yield.
Speaker Weathers, I move.
Is there a second? All right. Is there any objection to doing so? All right. She's been added. Acting Speaker debate.
Okay. I'm going to clarify. I do like what this club does, and I want to see them get the debt contract. However, as the current acting chair of rules and acting speaker, I think it is imperative on me to explain why it was sent unfavorably, and that was because of the language. What came up in committee is under Section 6, there is a vague clause that says for this amendment to be ratified by student government, it must pass a Senate order with an affirmative 2/3 vote without any further qualification. At first, I was, as Senator Mahoney was, in favor of just sending it no bias, but then the committee ended up debating for a couple of minutes on what this term actually meant, and then seeing the confusion even within rules, we sort of felt that it was on us as Rules Committee reviewing the language of the contract that we should at least make that known, and that if we're getting confused right now, that is proof itself, in our opinion, it came out of our discussion that 2 or 3 years from now, if we need to make an amendment, there might be confusion in future Senates as well. Now, Roberts under Section 44, paragraph 3 says an unqualified 2/3 vote just means 2/3 of people present and voting. However, this is a contract. It's not an internal matter. I'm not sure Roberts applies here. It's sort of similar to the treaty power for the United States government, if I may go that far. But I know Finance Director Zaster was waving his hand, so I'll pose you a question.
Yeah, I just want to say, nice thing about them having a debt contract before, this is an exact copy of the previous debt contract that I made, just updating total semesters and so on. So this language was in the previous debt contract. I would not be surprised at all if this exact same language is in other debt contracts we already have. I would say we have a court. If it ever comes to a point where we need to arbitrate this, let the court do it. But this should not be a reason to preclude them from funding, especially considering that this needs to be passed or failed tonight.
Certainly. Finance Director Zaster, do you think this will go to the student government court, or considering this is a legally binding contract, it could be adjudicated by powers beyond?
I'm not answering that.
I yield.
Any other points of discussion or questions for the representatives? Question's been called and seconded. Now go into a voting period. A contract like this requires 2/3 of seated senators, just for the body's information. All right. Debate?
Yes.
Adegarla?
Yes.
Ulrich?
Yes.
Becker?
Yes.
Brecht? Carter?
Yes.
Claiborne?
Yes.
Bohr?
Yes.
Haas? Bueller?
Yes.
Larson?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Yes.
Mascar? Mays? McCready?
Yes.
Patel?
Yes.
Paulson?
Yes.
Ruley?
Yes.
Knapp?
Yes.
Seth?
Yes.
Sayway?
Yes.
Excuse me. Strickland?
Yes.
Thornton? Wagmeister?
Yes.
Ruick?
Yes.
All right, with a vote of 25 to 0 to 0, the bill passes. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to our next bill, ratifying a contract with Student Engagement 2021-3-030SA with Senator Wagmeister.
You heard about this earlier. I will give my opening speaking privilege to student engagement.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Merrill. I'm the Assistant Director in Student Engagement. This is Tim Ryder. He is well, I'll let you introduce yourself. How about that? I like doing that.
Hi, all. I'm Tim Ryder. I'm the Service Learning and Student Organizations Coordinator in Student Engagement.
So the bill in front of you today is looking at a contract for funding for student engagement. Student engagement is the office that oversees student organization systems, including the student organization database, event authorization. We do programming around leadership and service initiatives, including leadership seminars, conferences, retreats, those sorts of things. We also do service trips, alternative break service trips, which happen both in fall and spring breaks. And also our office oversees the workspace, and one of their programs that is included in this contract is the Focus Grant program. This contract is designed to put together an agreement between our office and student government for funding that we are already asking for during the regular allocations or the annual allocations processes, with the intent of combining it into like a 3-year contract rather than having to go through the annuals. The idea of this whole contract is that as an office, and we're trying to program multiple year initiatives, that waiting each year for annual allocations to make the programming for students can sometimes get that can be a barrier for us to plan longer term or create initiatives that might happen outside of the fiscal year funding. So having funding kind of move in and out can be problematic for us to actually work on things that might span over the summer, or we're trying to create something now for the fall. We might have to wait till the annual allocations process goes through, and then the funding doesn't come into our account until September, and then we're kind of working through that. So the whole idea of this contract is to not ask for this would not be an addition to our allocation typically. This would then replace our allocations, and then we could just create a better program for students, essentially.
Still your speaking privilege, Senator Bogmeister.
I will, Finance Director Zastro, anyone else want the rest of my opening speaking privilege? All right, I'll yield then.
We'll enter into debate, Senator Mahoney.
So I know last year when you guys came through annual allocations, we ended up funding, I believe, $97,585 from what we saw earlier in our presentation. I was just curious if you could touch on why the number's increasing by about 13,000.
So I'm not sure the number that you were looking at exactly. Did that include the Focus Grant programs as well? It did. Okay. So what we've based these numbers on are the allocations that we've requested, funding that we've requested over the last 3 years. So what we are looking at is trying to figure out how we can future cast for 3 years of requests into one. So we would anticipate each of our years moving forward that we would be requesting more money. Things are not getting less expensive. Prices of goods are really variable right now. So what we're trying to do is create a finite amount that we can count on so we can forecast. And then in the contract, it talks about as student enrollment fluctuates, so with this funding. So if we're anticipating anticipating student organization, if we're anticipating student enrollment going down, this would then look at decreasing over a year rather than increasing. But that would still give us more flexibility and set budgets that we can work with and future cast. So we're trying to both ask for what we've asked for in the past, and then also plan on we're going to ask for increased funding just because it's really difficult. For instance, asking for keynote speakers or anything like that right now is really difficult because that market is saturated with people who are getting higher fees to not go places. So that's increasing the cost to even get the speakers here. So we're competing even against other places who are asking for the same talent that we are, but in a different way that's easier for them. So we have to up our costs to compensate. So all things like that kind of play into it, and that's why we're asking for the amount that we have asked for in the past, but it's landing in the contract. It just looks a little bit different. But we're definitely receptive to how enrollment impacts student government's funding, and that's why we built into this contract an automatic adjustment based on enrollment.
Thank you for that. While I do, Finance Director Zastro, I suppose.
I just wanted to say, if anybody wants to look at previous budgets in our online finance program. The name for them in there is still Student Activity Center, so you can search for that. That's how you'd find old budgets.
Okay, and while I do greatly appreciate and like the programs that you guys put on with the money that we do give you, and I understand the want for more financial stability or guarantees, I suppose, I have a tough, it's a tough pill for me to swallow at the moment when student government is facing our own budget crunch. And we're increasingly concerned with how much of our money is tied up in long-term contracts that we can't touch. As enrollment, say enrollment drops 5%, we lose 5% of our budget. Most of our money is already in fixed costs. And so that hits our clubs, which I think are some of the most important organizations that we fund, basically by 10%. And so I'm concerned with losing our financial flexibility that I think we need to preserve as we're in the next couple of years looking at making budget cuts almost across the board. And so I don't think it's prudent of us at the moment to be entering into what is essentially a $330,000 contract over the next 3 years. I just think it's unfortunate the timing that this contract is coming through, but I don't think it's financially prudent of us to enter into a contract like this at the moment.
Acting Speaker Adbate.
So my views on this contract are multifaceted, and I might have spoken on some of those already, but so to set the premise, the student government's income is not guaranteed. And so that is completely dependent on enrollment going up and down, and as a result, I think we should be hyper-scrutinizing anything that guarantees our outlays, money that's going out, because that's not guaranteed on the first place when it's coming in. We also should keep in mind that these are student activity fees. You and me pay thousands of dollars to the university, and maybe 40 of those make their way to student government. Student activity fees, in my opinion, are primarily for the purpose of students. I'm not saying that doesn't mean we can fund university departments. We do. However, this contract is going to an office within the Memorial Union, so a university department. I think if we are funding university department, that needs to be a special case, sort of a one-off. Finance Director Zasser, do you know for how long we've been funding student engagement?
Let me go back to your budgets, and then I can find it. The first year that they have a budget on OFP is FY16. It's possible that they got funded through the special allocations process prior to that. I'm not sure.
All right. I'm not necessarily opposing funding university departments, but this has been going on for a while, and passing a contract essentially formalizes that in a very long-term manner. I don't know how comfortable I am with that. Acting Vice Speaker Aldrich, if you could pull up a graph. Yes. I also wanted to bring attention to the fact that a rather significant proportion of our funding right now is tied up in fixed contract spending. And as Finance Director Zasser did mention in his program, it's only astronomically and dramatically going up from this point onward. Every dollar that's going into a contract is a dollar that we can't spend discretionarily. It's a dollar that can't go to a student organization. And I think that's really what the primary purpose of student activity fees is. Moving on, I think, as Senator Mahoney said, we also need to look into a bigger holistic picture of our current financial situation, enrollment, what that might be looking like, the uncertainty on that front. All of this is without looking at the rules and the language concerns that came up. There's a term of the contract. This is 3 years. Section 1A only refers to an affirmative 2/3 vote, without any more qualifications, the same problem rules had with the last contract. 3A isn't terribly specific. I understand that's just illustrative. Under 4A2, the automatic decrease seems to make sense tied to enrollment. The automatic increase, I think, is a little more questionable. This is my personal opinion. I should make that clear. That being said, even if you don't look at what rules said, I think what I'm saying here is I'm not saying we should defund student engagement. I'm only saying that funding the contract in the manner and the form that it is in front of us right now reduces the flexibility that we have, and it sort of affects us. I'm not considering this is such a large amount. I think looking at it on a year-by-year basis is a little more beneficial for us as a body. I'm not saying that what student engagement does is not valuable to the student body. I'm just saying perhaps the proposed funding structure is not the way to go. I do have an exam tonight. in a few couple minutes from now, and as much as I love this organization, I would like to pass my classes and graduate in a couple months. So I will be running out. Unfortunately, I will not be able to answer questions. I've shared my comments at depth with our newly sat Senator Brick. I'm sure he'll be able to answer some of the questions you have coming out of this if you do. Sort of on my way out, I just wanted to highlight that we are now at 33 seated senators. As per our Constitution, we require 2/3 of seated senators to ratify a contract. That would bring us up to 23 senators. There are 25 in the room right now. There'll be 24 once I leave. So don't think you passed it if it's just 2/3 of present. Just keep that in mind. I yield.
Senator Seth?
Okay, so I have a couple of questions for representatives from student engagement. So obviously, I think we're all in agreement that this is a lot of money. $300,000 is, something that I probably won't make in the next 5 years of my life, right? So I'm a little uncomfortable allocating this amount of funding to you in a contract unless I know more specifically what you're going to do with that, with the funds, if it were sitting in a contract. So do you have any concrete plans or ideas of things that you want to do that you were not able to do previously if you have this 3-year contract?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about more generally, and Kevin can touch on specifics, but as we're talking about this, one thing I would put out for consideration is that the money that would be coming through this contract would be, by and large, reinvested in student organizations. This is money that funds Fall Club Fest, Spring Club Fest, all of our leadership trainings that are, a lot of them, most of them actually, are geared towards student organization officers and building connections with one another and trying to improve their own leadership skill sets while also collaborating with others on campus. So I understand the need and want for wanting to fund student organizations directly, but this funding would go back into student organizations and providing them resources and also funding critical infrastructure like the student organization database, the marketplace, the university event authorization system. And so it's not that it would just come to our office and sit there, it's directly going back to benefiting student organizations. And in terms of concrete ideas, some of the ways that we're constantly trying to innovate is with our leadership programming and trying to get a sense and trying to build programs that meet student needs. One of those that I'll highlight was and Kevin can talk much more about it, was through the Iowa Student Leadership Experience this year. We have been working with the University of Iowa and University of Northern Iowa to really build that leadership program. So we're not only building connections between student leaders at Iowa State and student org officers at Iowa State, but across the state as well. I don't know if you want to touch base on that. But again, I would just say that this money is almost entirely reinvested back into the student body and student orgs as well.
Yeah, and I'll say things that it covers that are concrete are student organization database improvements. Tim mentioned that. Event authorization improvements. Every time any of those systems break, it's several $100s for IT to repair them. So just the basic maintenance cost and the hosting costs of those things, those are finite. We have around a dozen leadership programs they're putting on right now. Iowa State Leadership, Iowa Student Leadership Experience is one of them. We do Social Justice Summit. We have 4 Leaders Workshop Series. We do the We Lead. We, in the past, have done TEDx. That's come and gone based on interest. We have our usually 6 to 8 alternative breaks programs. My mind is going blank a little bit. That's not to mention all of the other resources that we create just for student organizations in general, the printing costs it takes to advertising all these programs, all those things. It breaks down to several $1,000s kind of like per larger grouping of items. So if you look at OFP, you can kind of see how that goes. Every time we do a program and we promote it, it's about $300. That's about the cost. So if you look at the contract and say it's a lot of money in three years, that's kind of like where I want you to be. Like in 3 years, how many students does that serve? Not, it's a lot of money. Yeah, it's a lot of money. But how many students does that serve? How many student organizations does that serve? How can we be thinking about the types of programs that those students will need? That's kind of where we're looking at for this contract. Again, this is sort of mirroring what we're asking for with annual allocation. So it's not as if we are asking for triple what we've ever asked for. It's essentially what we're asking for is just that we can make this a relationship that's written down that we can look forward to. Part of the contract is that we would come and do an annual report, and we can explain in much more detail all these things. A new program we like to develop is a longer-term leadership cohort-based program where a cohort of 30 to 60 students could come in, meet with leaders across campus, and build that community of leadership over the course of a semester, 2 semesters, possibly even multiple years. So it is a broader picture than just a program that costs a lot of money. This money also isn't funding staff positions. It's not funding anything other than
30 seconds.
It's not funding anything other than programming or support for student organizations, student leadership, service, and the focus grant.
Right. Acting Vice Speaker DeVore.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I would have to agree with most of the comments made so far, probably regarding contracts. While I do appreciate the piece built into this contract, be flexible with enrollment, I would probably not be comfortable increasing funding for this department by the roughly $13,000, like you'd said. While I understand that your guys' costs are increasing, so are everyone else's. Every other club that we're funding is facing increased costs. So, you know, any extra dollar that we would contract to you guys would be one less dollar that we could appropriate to our clubs and organizations on campus that we also need to keep in mind when voting on this, because like Vice Speaker Advait said, these are student fee dollars paid by students. While I appreciate, you know, the things that you guys are doing working for students, I think personally I would rather see this department come through our annual allocations process, just so we have the added flexibility to, you know, balance sort of how much we want to allocate towards them annually versus our clubs and organizations versus being stuck to a contract. I yield.
Senator Patel.
I would like to yield my time to Finance Director Zastro.
Thank you. Yeah, I would just like to disagree a little bit with one idea that's been brought up, which is that this isn't coming back to student organizations. This is the infrastructure that student organizations use, specifically the online student organization systems. That's the kind of thing that I think, like the reason that we have student legal services come through is because we know that that's something that we're going to value a few years out. I think that the infrastructure for student organizations to maintain their websites, to be able to publicize themselves, that's something that we're going to continue to value over the course of the coming years. And that increased financial security for them means that they might be able to contract for larger projects that would let them work farther in advance. So I think that's something that ought to be considered. One other point I'd like to make, Tim, I know you mentioned previously that there could be some potential cost savings if you're booking multiple years out. If you could speak to that a little more, I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah, so one of the programs I oversee is the Alternative Breaks program, and just like every other program that we do, costs are also increasing there as well. And one of the issues that we're also running into with our service sites is that service sites are being booked multiple years out. And with going through an annuals allocation process every single year and not being certain of what kind of funding we may have to help subsidize those trips, that really limits our ability to find and secure quality service sites for the students that participate. And these are very high impact programs. Whereas if we were able to find service sites where we could put in a tentative agreement with them to have these relationships built over the course of multiple years, we can deliver high quality, high impact programs for the students that anticipate. And by doing so, we can potentially save some money on their end if they're able to secure us for that amount of time. And that's just one example. I don't know if you have others.
Do you yield? Okay. Moment.
Move to remove Senator Advait from the role.
Okay, is there a second? Any objection? All right, Senator Advait's been removed from the role. Senator Seth.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question. So I am just curious to hear a little bit about what metrics you have for gauging how utilized your services are. Do you take attendance at events? Like, how do you know, like, what metrics do you have to see if students are actually utilizing the resources that you're providing in student engagement?
Yeah, we do. We have some metrics. I tried to pull some before coming to the meeting, so I don't have like the full full picture. Let's see where to go. To give you a sense of how many student organizations that we impact, it's all of them. So all 900 approximate student organizations. There's 4,600 students in leadership roles. So we interact with many of them through the student organization database and trainings, things along those lines. Event authorization, we had approximately 3,000 student organizations through that alone. And then in the fall, we had, between August and December, we had 1,198 events in our event authorization system. Those are some hard numbers I have for you. Most of our programs, they vary in attendance, so they vary from around like 30 upwards of several hundred in some cases. Club Fest, for instance, what was our numbers on Club Fest in the fall?
I think we estimated around between 6,000 and 7,000.
Yeah, so around 6,000 to 7,000 people who were in attendance of that event. And that's with approximately, was it just under 300 clubs? Yeah, at that event. So we have some of those numbers. I don't have them right in front of me at the moment. Does that answer sufficiently, or would you like more information we could try to pull?
No, I think that's sufficient. Thank
Okay.
you. I'll yield.
I'm sorry, I don't have all of the numbers in
No,
front of me.
you're fine. You're fine.
Senator Carter?
Yeah, I want to throw out there, like, I appreciate, I think it's good that so many of us are thinking about, like, Senate's flexibility when it comes to funding things, but at the same time, I think it's important to remember that while our flexibility might work for some student organizations, for larger entities like student engagement, I think that it's a good point that Finance Director Zastrow made, that giving them the benefit of more space to be able to plan out in advance, I think is actually beneficial for our student organizations, as opposed to, in other words, I think we should be privileging the benefits that they can do by being able to plan out in advance over any flexibility that we perceive we might be able to have when it comes to funding them, because I think that their money ultimately, or the money is ultimately going to help organizations more that way.
Acting Vice Speaker DeVore.
So question for Finance Director Zastrow. I don't think it's anything we've ever done before, but is there the possibility to be able to contract sort of thing, like contract the online student organization systems and then send the organization through annual allocations for the remainder of the requests?
Yeah, something like that would be possible. With student legal services, they come through annuals in addition to having a contract. For the fixed cost, it's about, I want to say like $260,000 or something like that for their rent and their salaries, thank you. And then their like annual office expenses, their advertising costs, that comes through annuals still. That's not I think the difficulty with that, though, is that those, at least with student legal services, I guess it could be different for any other organization. Sub also has a similar structure, I'll say. But for student legal services, at least, we just don't touch any of their line items. There were a couple motions made to reduce the cost this year, but all of them failed. So, yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. So it sounds to me like it's something we can do. It's allowed. We just haven't looked into it for this organization, maybe?
Not for this organization in particular. The contract states that they're still able to get funding through the regular allocations process. So if we were to do that, I think it would be really difficult to get done for planning for FY23. I don't think we could get it done for FY23, since we do need to be introducing that bill next week. And not knowing whether the contract would be passed at that point, I don't think there would be time. Yeah, Kevin's got something to say on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to point out that part of the point of this contract is that the needs that we have within our Office for Programming and creating initiatives for students, or creating resources for students, is that we need some flexibility in the funds, and subdividing this out into just this amount for this, and this amount for this, and this amount for this is actually counter to the point of this contract. I fully believe that if we had a significant need in one area, that if we could present our case to student government in the moment, that we could maybe get something to happen. What we're trying to avoid is that slowing down the process from getting accomplished what students are asking for, or the thing that needs fixed. In the example, we had an example several years ago where we had some surplus funds. We came to student government. We were able to put the storage lockers into the West student office space. We asked for money. It was about a 50-50 of allocating money from different places and then putting it and asking for student government for around $10,000. With this contract in place, we would have been able to just do that. We wouldn't have asked for more money. We've been able to say, we've saved in these areas. This is a resource we want to create. It moves student organizations out from the basement. It was an accessibility issue and a safety issue. And we would have been able to just accomplish that for student organizations without asking for funds from you to do so. So I'm afraid that if we were to divide up some of the things we asked for and create different kinds of contracts, that would actually limit our ability to serve students, especially serve students quickly, or make some decisions about what we should do next year, put money towards that in the amount that we're allowed to carry forward, and then make that happen right away for student organizations.
Thank you. My thought process behind it was just that perhaps if this contract doesn't pass, that if you guys could look into something like contracting, because I know you said for your online services, you can save money if you book ahead. If we could work out a contract with you guys for that.
Sure.
And send you through allocations for the rest, that maybe that'd be beneficial.
Yeah.
Certainly up to you guys upon whatever happens tonight. But with that, I will call the question.
Question has been called. Is there a second? All right, we'll go ahead and enter into a voting period. Requires 2/3 of seated senators.
Closing comments?
Oh, yeah. Pardon me. Senator Wagmeister.
Do either parties have a closing comment?
I think that every day we work to support students and student organizations to create trainings and services and systems that will help them accomplish what they want to accomplish. And that one of the things that that was said was that investing in this is more of like a infrastructure type investment. It's not necessarily like a dollar to dollar. So if you're looking at, I don't like the idea of this being, $1 more than we would like to spend this year or next year or whatever. It's investing in infrastructure of not only systems, but people. And I know there was a conversation earlier tonight about a debt contract. One of the things that we have as part of our system goals is to create operations manuals that serve more like system-saved transition documents for organizations to look at. But that costs money to build, and it takes several years to maybe get that off the ground and tested and implemented for students, and students trained on those things. So that's what we're looking at doing, is asking for you to help us invest in not only the systems, also the programs, and also the people. We do all those things, and that's really our goal. So we're going to continue this work. We'll continue to work with student government to make the best things that we can to support the students the best way we know how, and that is essentially our goal with all of this. It's not to do anything other than support students the best way we know how.
I apologize, I've been forgetting to do closing analysis the entire time.
That's normal.
All right, we'll go ahead and go into a vote. Be a roll call vote. Adegarla. Ulrich.
Yes.
Becker.
No.
Brecht. No. Carter.
Yes.
Claiborne. DeVore.
No.
Haas. Bueller. Larson.
No.
Blunt. Excuse me, she's not here. Mahoney.
No.
Askar. Mays. McCready.
No.
Patel.
No.
Paulson. Ruley.
No.
Knapp.
No.
Seth. Dayway.
Yes.
Strickland.
Yes.
Thornton.
No.
Wagmeister.
Yes.
Ruick.
No.
Adegarla.
No.
Claiborne.
Yes.
Seth.
No.
All right, it's gonna take me a moment, sorry. With a vote of 8 to 16 to 0, the bill fails.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on to 2021-3-016F, supplementing the account allocations for the next fiscal year bill. Senator Rulli.
Finance Director Zastra already talked about this a lot. I will yield to him if he has anything else to say about it.
Yeah, sure. So I will say, first of all, we got the finance amendment here from the special projects account. That one's pretty straightforward. The second thing, a couple sneaky little words in here, up to $300,000. This is because it's possible that after everything is said and done, we won't need the full amount to be supplemented. That's just going to depend on where we're at after cuts. As it stands right now, if I can find it on my Excel sheet, I'm sorry. We currently are below $300,000, though. I can tell you that much. We're currently at 276. That would need to be supplemented, all else equal. I know that there were a few things in committee that we felt like we were, especially during the first few days when it was looking like we were going to need to cut 175,000 just to get down to 300,000. That we might want to revisit as opportunities to fund clubs more than their original budget hearing. So yeah, that's why it's still being kept at 300,000 instead of dropped any lower than that. Also say the change in student engagement being moved off of a contract. Since we're already below that number, I don't think we need to change the 300,000 number. So that's my opinion.
All right, Senator Rulli.
While I still have the floor, I will move the Finance Committee amendment.
All right, we'll go into discussion on that. Question has been called and seconded. We'll go into a vote. Unanimous consent has been called for. Is there any objection to adopting the Finance Committee amendment by way of unanimous consent? All right, it's been adopted into the bill. Back to discussion on the bill as a whole. Senator Thornton.
Finance Director Zastrow, can you explain very quickly why we are allocating funds to account allocations instead of the student activity fee reserve account? If the student activity fee reserve account is the one that's being drained, just to clarify that for me personally, I don't know if other people are also confused on that.
So the account allocations for next fiscal year bill is the one that we call the big picture bill. So this isn't changing, this isn't adding any money to an account that has previously been drained. This is just correcting the mistake for future years. Yeah, does that clarify?
Okay, thank you. I yield.
All right. Senator Mahoney.
FD Zastrow, so if we do pass this, then our student fee reserve account won't be touched this upcoming year, so it'll continue to go up, correct? We're protecting it essentially, right? Is that my understanding?
Yes, with the caveat that since this is for the big picture bill for FY23, there's still going to be most likely a substantial amount taken out at the end of FY22, but after that, should be good.
Are there any other points of discussion? Question has been called and seconded. I'm now going to closing comments of Senator Rulli. Okay. Now, then we'll go into a voting period. Requires 2/3 of present senators. We'll do a roll call vote. Adegarla. Ulrich.
Yep.
Becker. Yes. Brecht. Carter.
Yes.
Claiborne.
Yes.
Bohr.
Yes.
Haas. Bueller. Larson. Lent. Me again. Mahoney.
Yes.
Mascar. Mays. McCready.
Yes.
Patel. Paulson. Rulli. Knepp. Seth. Dayway. Skaggs. Not here. Strickland. Thornton. Wagmeister. Ruick. With a vote of 24 to 0, the bill passes. All right, then we will go ahead and move on to new business, the top of which is 2021-3-033 SA, ratifying the fiscal year 2023 asset contracts with Senator Rulli.
This is part of a two-part bill that is required for the nonprofit coordinator position. This first bill ratifies all the contracts for each individual nonprofit and program that we fund through our asset process. This part does all the contracts. The next part I'll talk more about.
Are there any questions of intent for Senator Rulli? Senator Mahoney.
Will you add perhaps an amendment said contracts to this bill so we can see them?
Yes.
Any other questions of intent? All right, seeing none, we'll see that next week. So on to 2021-3-017F, approving the asset recommendations again with Senator Rulli.
Yeah, so this one is this ratifies the specific recommendations that were completed during the asset process this January. If the link on there, the attachment, it is a very large spreadsheet. If you want to take a look at that, the line that we are looking at is going to be, or the column we're looking at is the ISU column on there. That is the amount of funding that we're giving to each individual program. And then the agency is the one on the far left. That is the agency that we were funding that program for. Read it like a table. You go all the way down to the bottom. The total is $260,275. And there are also some notes at the bottom. Yeah, that is that.
Any questions of intent for Senator Rulli? All right, seeing none, we'll see that next week. Go on to 2021-3-034SO, tasking Public Relations Committee with developing outreach reforms. That would go to Vice Speaker Bay, but because he is gone as the co-sponsor, I guess it goes to me, even though I'd prefer not to speak on it as the author. But suppose I will if there's no objection from the body. I wrote it. It's a similar thing that happened last year. Rules Committee got tasked with developing particular reforms in a field that we saw needed. Public Relations Committee being the committee tasked with outreach, and we have some outreach problems, though not entirely their fault, not even remotely their fault. It's an institutional problem. But PR Committee is the outreach committee, so we tasked them with outreach reform via this bill, if it were to pass. Are there any questions of intent for myself? Senator Brecht.
Yes. Were any of the contents of the bill discussed with the Public Relations Committee before it being placed on the agenda?
No.
Thank you.
Any other questions of intent? All right, seeing none, we'll see that next week. All right, now we'll go on to closing announcements. Finance Director Zastro.
You've definitely heard me talk enough, but I really appreciate the conversation that went on in this meeting. I thought it was a really informed discussion. I appreciate the clear listening that you did to my program. I know that it was long and full of numbers and pretty boring, but yeah, the discussion here matters a lot, and I think that the outcomes of the discussion are, I don't know, really vital to a helpful Senate. So you've done long-term planning and short-term planning tonight in a way that has been really critical. Appreciate it.
All right, Senator Seth.
Howdy, folks. Just a final reminder, because I won't see you all until like next week. The trivia night is tomorrow in the MU in room 3560 from 6 to 8 p.m. Be there or be square. That's all.
All right, Senator Mahoney.
So I would hope all of us in this room have, but just a reminder that voting closes for student government elections at 11:59 tonight. So if you haven't voted, go do that, like now. But please, 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 please urge your friends to vote if they haven't already. We all know how important student government is, and so we want to have everybody at the university vote. So we want to get as many people to turn out for it as we can. So go urge your friends to vote.
Senator Patel.
I just wanted to bring up some attention that it is Rebecca's birthday. So, yeah. Happy birthday.
All right, I guess it goes on to me. I appreciate everyone's patience with me as the acting chair of the meeting. It was a lot of fun. Hopefully I didn't screw it up too bad, but I appreciate your patience again. We'll go ahead and move on to our acting table over here with Acting Vice Speaker DeVore.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be your acting vice speaker tonight for about half a meeting. I just want to say, great conversation tonight, I think. Good luck to everyone with elections and results coming out. I won't see you guys next week. I'll be leaving for my spring break study abroad trip. So everyone also have a good spring break.
Acting Speaker Ulrich.
Yes, and thank you for allowing me to be up here tonight, and thanks for coping with my few technical difficulties. I have no closing announcements. With that, I move to adjourn.
All right. Is there an objection? All right, we're adjourned.